Welcome to the All Central Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Larry Kirk, and I am joined with the great theologian of our time. He's the most brilliant person I've ever met. He's the Brit from Baltimore. Pastor Jonathan Prothero is with us.
Thank you.
And we also have a super highly intelligent human being sitting across from us today. He's our special guest, Tony McCusker. He's laughing about it. I'm not sure why, but he's does some amazing things, some incredible things. We wanted to have him in because we wanted to kind of deep dive into just some things that people, I think, are struggling with across the board. From what I understand, it's on the rise, this anxiety, depression, mood disorders, all of those things are on the rise. And so we have to be careful probably what we talk about as far as like the pandemic, but it's something that has definitely equated to the problem and added to it. And so Tony, give us a little bit of background about what you're doing now and a little bit more about you.
I started off in addictions, worked at the Westminster Rescue Mission, was the superintendent or pastor, whatever you want to call it, there, and then worked with Mountain Manor and Serenity, were two outpatient services. Did like groups like IOPs, outpatient, stuff like that, a little bit of individual, but it was more group. And then from there went into mental health.
You did that for 8 years, I believe it was, or something like this around
all
that?
Combined.
All combined 8 years, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then went into mental health, dealing more with mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and trauma.
Okay. So with I know we're going right into it a little bit, but because I think it's just that kind of topic that we can start to unpack a little bit more. Do you see a correlation and a connection between addictions and mental health disorders and the combination of the two, and
yes,
how that
and it depends. It can either addiction, a part of addiction can be because of a mental health disorder. Like individuals that have ADHD are more likely to use marijuana if you use because they're trying to cope, and that's one of the things I live by. If you ask the wrong question, you never get the right answer. So people will say, well, they're just not trying to cope with anything because they're using. Well, that's not true. Everybody tries to cope. The question is what they're doing healthy or unhealthy? And I think we take away from people and we put them down. And that's not what it's about. We're supposed to be helping people get up.
Man, that's so good.
And when so they'll either use because they have a mental health, that kind of leads them into it, or they use and they develop a mental health disorder. Addiction is considered that as well, but they'll develop things like anxiety. They can get PTSD because if you're living on the street and you're using, you might be getting enrolled, you may be getting raped, all kinds of different stuff happen. So it's it can be a combination. And I personally, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I have a hard time with it being a disease and all that. I think it's there is a change in the brain. You struggle with that part, It is a change in the brain. Okay, but I don't care who you are. No one's using heroin casually. Let me shoot some heroin. Let me smoke some meth. Let me do some crack. And if anybody did it, you're going to get addicted to it. And I understand there's some people who can drink and never become addicted, but there's phases of that. So the first phase is when you start to use alcohol to deal with frustration, to deal with stress. That's the first phase because you're going to start drinking more.
Like I need to have a glass of wine at night before I go to, so it can help me go to bed. It starts there, week, right? Just simple.
I deserve a drink.
Right.
I need to go have a drink, just take the edge off.
Yeah.
And they'll start saying things like this. So you do that for long enough and you'll begin to develop an addiction, and people either they don't realize it or they don't remember that alcohol is a drug.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only two drugs that you can die from during withdrawal. So alcohol and benzodiazepines you can die from during withdrawal. You can't from heroin, you can't from meth.
Wow.
You can overdose, but you can't die during withdrawal.
So am I right in understanding what you're saying here? Because most, I think, medical practitioners, I'm talking maybe more GPs or doctors or whatever, from what I hear, the rhetoric tends to be that they class addiction as an illness, but from a therapist or a psychological perspective, you don't class it as that, or you struggle with that, or I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, just to clarify that you see it as more of it's not a mental illness, or it is a mental illness, people who dive into that, or they're just using it as some type of coping mechanism for whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that there's been more research come out now that is showing that it's not necessarily a disease.
Gotcha.
I don't blame you for getting cancer.
Yeah.
But you get addicted, I expect you to stop.
Huh.
So why are you expecting them to stop if it's a disease? I mean, and they shouldn't be held to any. But one of the main things you have to do with someone who's in addiction is not provide a safety net. You don't want to.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you want to kind of step back and say, if you're going to fall, you're going to fall. I'm here to help you. And that's what I used to tell the folks that I used to work with, the men at the Mission, or the folks that I worked with at the other places. If you're working, you may relapse. That's a part of it. In any addiction, whether it's pornography or whether it's social media or whether it's anything. And that's okay. If you're trying, if you really want it and you're working hard, I'll go through the fire for you. I'll go through whatever. I'll be right by your side. But if you're going to play a game and you're not going to work and you're using it as an excuse, then you're on your own.
So sometimes people will use illness or disease as an excuse or a justification for why they're doing what they're doing.
Yep.
And your point is, well, but there's a coping mechanism. There's something going on behind the surface here. You're choosing to make this decision.
Right. At first.
And then it becomes an issue where, well, is it still a choice? It's just an automated choice. It's a rewiring of the brain where you jump to, this is what I have to do now.
Right. So dopamine, let's say like the bottles of water there, that would be maybe like 5 bottles of water on the table would be the normal amount of dopamine that's released in the brain. And the 2 ways that dopamine is released the highest naturally is food and sex, which makes sense. You have to procreate and you got to eat to live.
Right.
And then we get it from other things. So then you start using a drug and you're not really getting addicted. There is a chemical dependence, but what you're really getting addicted to is the dopamine, because now you're getting 4 to 6 times the amount of dopamine that you're supposed to be getting. And your brain begins to say, well, hold up, this isn't right. And it starts to retract receptors. So what happens is that when you stop using, you're not using, your dopamine is down to maybe 2 bottles of water. So that's why you'll have somebody who was really into baseball or someone who was really into chess or whatever it is. Now they have absolutely no desire at all because they're not getting that dopamine release unless they use the drug.
Wow, man.
And then when you're going through the phases of recovery, that's tough because you're in danger of relapsing at every one. So you've got withdrawal, which your dopamine just drops off and you're struggling. So when you're going through alcohol or heroin or something like that, if you're going inpatient, they'll use like Xanax and things to help you get through. Suboxone, they'll use that. Suboxone is a combination of a blocker and buprenorphine. Which
is that like a psychotic drug though? No, it's not.
What it is, it's a synthetic opiate.
Okay.
Buprenorphine, and then they have a blocker so that if you use, you can't get high. And as you take it, it satisfies the craving. But I'll share something in a minute that's very interesting to me. But so they'll use that to help you come off of it. So then once you're off of it, a lot of folks will go on, Bunavail, Suboxone, there's different types.
Yeah.
So where I was going with this. So when so they're off of it now, right? And they'll go through what's called the pink cloud or the honeymoon stage, and their dopamine just shoots through the roof. And they're like, I feel great.
Right.
This is after like maybe 2 weeks to a month, and they're like, I feel great. Well, the danger of relapsing in withdrawal is because, I am struggling. I'm like in pain. And withdrawal from heroin is absolutely horrendous. And so now they're in the pink cloud. They're like, see, I told you, I'm good. I got this. You know what I mean? So you're back. So they really need to understand what's happening in their body. And then after the withdrawal, after the pink cloud, you hit what's called the wall. And that's when your dopamine drops off again. So now they're like, so what's the point in doing this? I'm back to being depressed. I'm anxious. I'm frustrated. I'm irritable. Because their brain is doing this. And their brain is trying to regulate the dopamine again. And it takes post-acute withdrawal is what it's called. It can take up to 2 years.
Wow, man.
Right.
So 2 years with a severe case, or even somebody who takes marijuana occasionally, that they can experience the same kind of withdrawal, or we're talking about people who are fully addicted to whatever it is?
Yeah, no, this is somebody who's really addicted.
Yeah.
And marijuana is addictive because you're getting addicted to the dopamine, and it becomes more psychologically addictive.
Right.
Because this is how I cope.
But couldn't you make the case, just playing devil's advocate, couldn't you make the case that everything's addictive? You know, I play a lot of golf. That can become addictive for exactly the same reason, the dopamine that it releases in my brain.
Yep.
Like, I know me personally, I am ADHD, and so I know there is always a dopamine deficiency for people who are ADHD, if what I know is correct. And so people like me, we're always looking to that next thing, whatever. We hyper focus on one thing because we're looking for that hit. But you could easily make the case, couldn't you, that all things could become addictive, or it doesn't quite work the same when you're talking about substances?
I think it can. I think there's a major, and like we were talking about how there's an uptick in depression and anxiety. And one of the reasons, I think, and I think science is showing it as well, is social media. They did a study that showed us that in social media produces the same amount of dopamine as cocaine.
Wow.
So you have
that like button. You look at them like buttons.
And the way they,
the
algorithms, the way they drop it. So let's say you find a picture of a cat you like, and you want to show somebody. What they do is they take that and they drop it down. So now you got to do this to get to it. You got to find it. So this is all building. This is no different than pulling a slot. It's the same thing.
Man.
Wow.
And you're doing it to get the reward.
Yeah.
Same thing with Facebook.
Yeah.
I keep picking up the phone to get the likes. And if I'm not getting the likes that I should get, or I'm not getting as many likes as my friend are getting, or I'm not having as much fun on Facebook, then I'm actually going to get depressed because how come they don't like me? How come I'm not as popular? How come no one's asked me to the party that they just had?
Yeah.
And it's so open now, it can cause a lot of issues. So they actually did a study for that too on depression and anxiety with Facebook, and showed that it caused an increase.
Well, it's crazy, isn't it? Because we're also, you know, if you think of gambling or a slot machine, people were struggling this, but not until their adulthood. Brains fully developed, but we're giving this to 7-year-olds now. You know, we're essentially opening up, as Simon Sinek would say, the liquor cabinet to a 7-year-old, and telling you to deal with the same amount of dopamine that a cocaine hit is going to give this child. And they're getting that from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way through. And then they'll come to church or a youth group. And, you know, we have 15-year-olds now who are dealing with such levels of anxiety and depression. It's like, where do you even begin with something like this?
Right. And it's because the dopamine is dropping off. So you see kids in school, I don't care about school. I don't care about going out and playing basketball. I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just give me my phone.
So it's a cause of inactivity in kids then. That kind of thing.
Sure, because they want to be on the phone. They want to be inside. And that's what a lot of them are doing. And you add in the pandemic, and which forced people to be inside. Yeah. And they were on it even more. Yeah. And now you're telling them to get off. And I've had parents come to me and say, you know, I go to tell my child to get off the video games and they lose it. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you can't just walk up and say, get off. So I show them how to get them off. You've got 20 minutes. You've got 10 minutes. You got 5 minutes. Because their brain is so flooded with dopamine. Now you're just like saying stop. They can't. And they're flipping out and they're saying, you know, rebellious. They're just being mean or whatnot. No, they're like flooded with dopamine, and you need to help them come off of it. And you need to monitor how much, because video games and moderation is good for the brain. Hand-eye coordination is good for thinking and
it's puzzle solving.
That's what my kids always told me. So they could stay on longer.
Dad, it's really good for me.
It's good for my
This is my education.
Yeah, it sells me over on the rugby field. I was like, what?
There's good life skills right here. Actually, I saw a funny YouTube clip of a dad he had a teenage boy who was so fed up of him playing games all day. He took his console, put it on the lawn, and he's got one of those big lawn mowers.
I loved it.
And the kid's screaming. You just watch him go straight over.
But he didn't look like a kid. He looked like he was in his 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the funny part.
He's probably 19.
I think that was the funnier part. So
as we're going through that post-acute withdrawal, what's happening, I like to compare it as, you know, when you go into a grocery store and you got the scales and you put something in there and the needle does this. And well, that's what's happening is the dopamine goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and eventually it starts to go back out to baseline and you're good.
Well, sorry to interject here so much. This is fascinating for me. I just take a step back. You talked about how we all cope with stuff, and we can either use healthy things or unhealthy things. So what do people do? Somebody who's stuck in addiction right now, whatever it is, well, there's a couple questions here. One, can addiction ever be healthy? And for somebody who's maybe struggling with something right now, they're trying to find equilibrium in their brains, they're trying to come off something. What do we put in place in their life? How do they find a new structure? Because do you just go stone cold turkey? What do? You've got to put something in there, because otherwise you just go nuts.
Exactly right. So you got to figure out, a good thing is hobbies or something else that you're going to do that's productive, that's positive, that you enjoy, is a good thing to put in there. I think it's really important with addiction to be in groups, because that group, that support, you need it. You can't be by yourself, because you're just not going to make it. So you got to be involved in a group. That's why AA works, Celebrate Recovery works, those things. NA, HA, CA, I mean, all of them. So it's and cold turkey, yes. I mean, but they probably need to go into inpatient for 28 days, and that's not enough. Honestly, if I could create a program that I would have myself about 100-acre ranch, I'd have about 10 to 20 horses, and I would bring people there for no less than 6 months. So instead of putting them in jail, because addicts don't belong in jail, they need to get help.
Yeah.
And I'd say mandatory, you're gone for 6 months to a year. We're sending you off to this ranch in Wyoming or wherever.
Sure.
Yeah. And you're going to be there, and you're going to work.
Yeah.
And that's what we used to do at the mission, is you had a job you had to do, and you were they were there for 6 months, and once they graduated for 6 months, they could stay an additional 6 months in work and save money to get themselves a car, to get themselves an apartment and things. Because you don't want to just drop them, okay, you're done, see ya, and they're, okay, so now they're going to be right back where they were.
Right.
So to be able to get them into a place where they have time away from everything, because it's not just the chemical, it's the process. So you can talk to someone who says, I was so like, oh man, I got to get my hit, you know what I mean? And as they're driving to get it, they start to feel a little bit of ease. That's a part of the ritual. So they're driving to get it. And then the ritual of the needle, you know, the syringe and the spoon, and all that stuff plays into it. So you got to break all of that. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I do not like methadone. Because not only it's so much harder to come off of than heroin. Yeah. Or even
no kidding.
Suboxone. Oh my gosh, it's horrific. So it's harder to come off of. Wow. But you're still keeping that ritual alive, because you're going to the center to get it every day. You're around a bunch of people, and there's people out there selling. Yeah. And then people get it. If I use that and I use heroin, how are you going to tell the difference? Right. Yeah. So I can sell that, and I can use that, or I can melt it and shoot it. There's all kinds. But no, you can't if you get it, because there's sometimes they've gotten it for like the weekend or something, because they're closed for whatever holiday or something. So they'll get some pills for. But the same thing with Subutex. Subutex is used. It doesn't have a blocker, and it's used for women who are pregnant and are coming off of heroin. They'll put them on that, so it stops the craving. But the blocker they can't do because it's harmful, which I think all of it's harmful. But it's a better solution than Suboxone. So you have some folks that come in and go, I have an allergy, so I can't use Suboxone. I want Subutex, and we're like, great, give me a doctor note saying that you're allergic, because without that you're not getting it, because you can melt it and shoot it. Because it doesn't have the blocker in it. The Suboxone has the blocker, so it becomes, you know, like real gummy and stuff, so you can't do that. But with the Subutex, you can melt it down and shoot it up. So it's knowing all these angles and stuff. So the brain gets restructured because there's so much dopamine. So people will see someone who's addicted, let's say, to heroin, and they'll steal, and the frontal cortex, which is where judgment comes from, is like getting hit in the head with a sledgehammer. It's just not there. Yeah. So they're not, okay, I'm going to steal to use, and that's completely justified. Right. And they'll steal from their parents, they'll steal from their families, they'll steal from whoever. Don't care. To do it, because they've got to get this, because they have no dopamine and hurting. And so it really does change things, and we have to have, it doesn't make it okay, but we have to have understanding where you're coming from. And I get why you're doing this, so let's get you help. So once they get off of it, here's the thing that I was saying before, there's Vivitrol, which is a shot. It's a blocker, naloxone, and it's you get a shot once a month, but there's nothing in it to stop cravings. But everyone that's been on it that I've seen has no cravings. Now, why is that?
Is it
It's a mental
thing. Isn't it?
I know I cannot.
Yeah.
I know I can't get high. So what's the point? And if you try and get high, it can kill you.
Right.
At the very least, it can send you off into a withdrawal that you're going to wish you never went into, and they know it. So what's the point in doing it? Just like you'll have some folks who'll they'll get through withdrawals, they'll be in jail, and you can get it easier in jail than you can out.
You talk about putting a guardrail in somebody's life that you're not going to cross that line,
right?
And it's a mental, and they
don't have any cravings.
And
So to me, it's also very mental, where it's a choice, and we've restructured our brains, just like with depression or anxiety. We've restructured our brains to say, I need this. This is something I have to have. This is how I deal with things. This is going to make me feel better. And they remember our brains are positive, so they tend to go to the good. Or I don't think women would have a second child. So it's all the good about it, and then another child. So it's the same thing. You start thinking about the high and the relief and how good it felt and the escape, and you don't think about the bad, which is a shame, but it's good and bad at the same time.
Yeah. And what's crazy is a lot of these things that we're searching for, dopamine hits, can be found in such healthy things. Like you said, hobbies, getting outside, going for a walk, exercise, running, sexual activity. All of these things are really helpful. They're the healthy, God-ordained, if you like, natural ways of getting these things. But things like COVID have made it difficult for us to access maybe what would be natural for us. Like gyms shut down, like you said, we were stuck indoors. And what are you left to do indoors? You can either read or pick up a TV screen or some kind of screen.
We did the jailhouse workout.
Jailhouse workout?
Yeah. We went out on the lawn and worked out in our driveway, me and the boys.
Well, yeah, that's
good.
We're going to kill each other, one of the two.
Right.
But I was a single guy in a studio apartment at the time. There is no outdoor. There's no one for me to talk to.
Yeah.
I had COVID and I had 10 days by myself.
He was
literally
sick, man.
by myself.
He was sick.
And
I was worried about him sick.
Yeah,
he was
that sucked, but big time. But it's but yeah, like you say, what else can you do? There is nothing else, and so it definitely didn't help. We talked a lot about addiction, but maybe how does this translate into anxiety, into depression? Are they connected? Or are these completely separate issues that people deal with? Because those things are on the rise, obviously. So how do those two things intersect?
Well, I think sometimes folks will use to deal with those things.
Right.
And but it only makes it worse. So, but then you can have anxiety just from being locked in your house.
Yeah.
And you're starting to, now you got to go out around people, and do they have COVID? Am I going to, because I hear, all this stuff starts going through your head. They're going to die. Am I going to die? And we allow that stuff to happen. So anxiety is not a disease. It's changeable. You can get rid of anxiety. Anxiety is a God-given thing, and it's good. But it's when it becomes distressful and starts to interfere with your life, that's when it's an issue.
Because it's a fight or flight thing, right? Sometimes it's like that goes off in you.
Right. So your brain tells you that this is, there's all kinds of chemicals involved and neurotransmitters and things. So you're walking down a path and a bear jumps out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm bailing. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not fighting a bear. I'm out. Some people will freeze, and it's not because they're cowards or anything. They're just, that's how the body reacts, and they freeze. I'm walking down the street with my wife, and somebody jumps out to try to attack her.
Yeah.
I'm fighting. You know what I mean? But that anxiety in it. So what happens is the brain begins to pump all these chemicals through, and your eyes will dilate, your muscles will tense, your heart rate increases, your breathing will get short and quick. Everything to get you prepared, which is a good thing, which is, like I said, natural. But then we get a belief, and our brain tricks us in thinking that whatever's happening is danger.
Yeah.
And it's not danger.
Yeah.
So let's say you have somebody who's dealing with PTSD, or they're dealing with just anxiety. And let's say they were in a car accident and it was raining. So now, well, I'm not driving in a car, and I'm definitely not driving a car when it's raining. And that fear is there. So now the anxiety is starting to grip their life and starting to take away. So what do you do when you got to go to work? I call out.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
What if you get 3 days of straight rain?
Right.
Yeah.
And your boss isn't going to put up with that for too long.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the anxiety when it hits, what we do is we avoid it. I just want to get away from it.
Yeah.
And when we get away from it, we get short-term relief. But the problem is long-term, it actually intensifies the anxiety because you fed to your brain that that's the right move.
Right.
That's the right choice to make, is to run.
Escape.
And you keep doing that and keep doing that, and the anxiety gets stronger and stronger over a period of time. So what you have to do is, the type of therapy that I'll use with it is cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy. So for the person, let's say, who had the accident in the rain, I would start off with, because what you have to do is you have to face, instead of avoiding it, you have to face it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way you overcome anxiety is you get yourself into an anxious moment. You have to get the anxiety to rise up. So you want to be like an 8 to 10 and not stop it. Just let it go. And then in that, you're using your coping skills, like your paced breathing.
To learn how to bring it back.
Self-talk, and you're bringing it down. And you're reframing your brain, rewiring your brain by doing that. Because if you're doing it where everything's calm, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But when you're in that angst moment, you use your coping skills, which brings you short-term relief. And by doing that, you're weakening the anxiety. So over time, it'll be gone. Yeah. So I would have that person, I'd say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go sit in a car. Okay, well, let's go stand beside the car. And the anxiety starts to rise up. Okay, so now, what are you feeling? Like, where are you? 1 to 10. I'm in an 8. Okay, great. So tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what you're experiencing. Yeah. And nobody wants to be in that, but that's how it's done. So, so you're like, okay. So, and then you talk them down. And where are you now? A 4. So tell me what's happened. What do you mean? Like, what's happening? Nothing. Exactly. Nothing's happening. Man. You're safe. You're fine. Then you get them in the car. Then they've got that where, where they're in a car and they're fine. Right. You get them to drive around the block when it's nice and sunny out. Everything's fine. 2 blocks, nice and sunny out. And then you go out and say it's raining, and we're going to drive. Right. And they drive, and they're they're all like anxious and stuff, and that's okay. Just it's all good. Yeah. And they come down, and the next thing you know, they're driving in the rain, and they could care less. So it's not something that has to, like, you'll hear somebody actually own it and say my anxiety. Yeah. Well, you're treating like a pet or something. You know what I mean? It's not your anxiety. It's anxiety that's happening, but don't own it. Right. And let's get past it by facing it.
They usually get a pet for it.
All right.
Right. I've seen that. It's your anxiety dog.
Just put a thing around there that's excuse for me to take my dog in the store.
Yeah. I guess it helps people though. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know I laugh at it a little bit, but because, I mean, I've shared this with you too, and shared with Jonathan, even the church, with anxiety. I mean, I had my own bout with it in 2021, and, not recognizing, realizing, like, what the heck was that? I didn't know what it was though. I was at the gym at a comfortable place at the gym where I'm normally at, friends, people I know. And it just hit me out of the blue. Like, I had to get out of there. It was like, man, I gotta get out of here. Like, it was like claustrophobic, but it was in a gym. And I'm driving down the road with my head out the window thinking I'm having a heart attack. And going to the house, going back to, I guess, safety net maybe. I don't know. But it's like 0 out, and my head's out the window and sweat's just rolling off of me. And I had no idea what that was. Yep. I had no idea what it was at the time.
Did you have like a pending sense of doom? And like you were going to die, and you were...
I did at that moment.
And your heart felt like you were having a heart attack?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's a panic attack.
Yeah. I mean, there was no doubt about it.
Did you ever figure out why it happened?
I don't want to turn this into a Larry Kirk therapy session. We may go here, and I don't know. I think I learned how to be able to start to cope with it. And then I really don't know the root of it, to be honest with you, Tony. I have no idea. I don't know if it was carrying over from 2020 and all the heaviness and the weightiness of all of that as a church. And I had thoughts at the time, like, okay, what's going to happen to the church overall? How am I going to pay these guys and their families? And because you don't know, it was the unknown.
It's a lot of weight.
It was the unknown. And I don't know if I got through 2020, and we soared through 2020. That was what the crazy thing was. We soared through it and did great as a church overall as a whole. And really felt like we helped people as well, because we opened up way before a lot of other churches did, and really helped people, like with their stuff, coming back from that. And then 2021 hit, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if it was the weight of all of that carrying into 2021 and just caught up to me. Mm-hmm. And then, you brought up something I think is really interesting, thought. And I don't know if you've mentioned that yet. We've talked about it on the side a little bit. Compassion fatigue. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was a part of the process of that. Did I have that? And so tell us a little bit more about compassion fatigue, because that's something that we discussed kind of behind the scenes. And I just wanted you to unpack that a little bit, because I just feel like maybe that's where I was too, a little bit, right, with all that. But
compassion fatigue is prevalent in providers like healthcare workers, first responders, therapists, pastors, because anyone who gives themselves away to someone else and takes on what they're dealing with, if you're not careful, you begin to take on, like, the compassion fatigue can kind of mimic a trauma where you can start to have the same types of things happening, or you get anxious, or you start to have like your thoughts and things. So there's a lot of things that can come along with that, and it's just important to know how to take care of yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because without self-care, we're all going to burn out, or it'll go beyond burnout. And you just are done. You just want to quit.
Maybe that's where I was at. You know what I'm saying? Like, not realizing it.
Right. I think sometimes we can allow stuff, like we pack it in. Yeah. And we just keep packing and packing. So if you take a pressure cooker, why does a pressure cooker, well, one, you have to bolt the top on, right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
And why does it have a valve? Yeah. Because if you don't, it'll explode. Yeah. So we're taking stuff into ourselves, and we're not having an outlet. We're not having a release, and we'll blow. Either we'll have a panic attack, we'll go into a full-blown like depression, we'll end up in a corner bawling. Anger, it's got to come out, and eventually it will, and it's not in a healthy way. Yeah. So it's important just to be able to process through it and to be able to get those things. Yeah. Knowing how to cope with it, knowing things like we were talking about, hobbies or things you love to do, to get an escape. So one of the things I started doing during COVID, because I was doing a lot of therapy online, which I'm still doing and I love it, but now I'm going back into the schools. So on the 29th, I'll be back in the schools on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I'm there all day, which I love working with kids. But before that, I would go out to the garage and I start making stuff. I made myself a desk. I made Michelle an 8-foot desk with barn doors, and made my sister-in-law like a coffee table and end tables and stuff. It's just a way for me to be able to just get it at, it's very country. I can't do all that real fancy stuff, but it's very rustic type stuff. But it was a way for me just to get out there, and I'd throw on a sermon. I'd throw on some worship music, maybe a little Christian rock, whatever I was in the mood for that day, and just work.
Little Chip Gaines out there.
Right, nowhere near. But be able to get it out, And then my wife and son came to me, and they're like, I think you should do a small group, like go to that Freedom Group with PR, and I was like, okay. So I did, and then he asked if I wanted to lead one, and absolutely. Yeah. And that's been a huge outlet for me.
Wheelhouse, man.
So it's kind of like being able to minister to others, but in doing that, it ministers to me. Just helping people in the Word of God and just really getting into that, it really helps to get that out. So it's different. It's not the same as, doing the therapy, just psychotherapy.
260 plus million people struggle with anxiety. They say 62% of them are women, actually, of that number.
In America?
I mean, no, I think
worldwide.
I think it's worldwide. Yeah.
In America, it's 1 in 5.
Yeah.
1 in 5.
Deal with anxiety.
What do you attribute to for women? That is, why is that number higher than men? And they even said like men are even further down. Like it's actually kids. You work with kids. It's women, then children, kids, and then men. But what do you attribute that number to for women?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that plays into it. I think it's different for everybody. But I think when you have a lady, especially now, when they go out and they work out of the home, and then they come home and they take care of the kids, and they're doing a lot of other stuff around the home. And let's be honest, a lot of men come home and plop their butts in a chair and don't do a whole lot. Yeah. I mean, we're just going to be straight up about it. And I think
I think we are. I think you're doing that.
And it's I'm not. So it's I think it's been a lot more pressure. I know for my wife, when the kids were at home, because my son deals with, with anxiety, and she made it a purpose. Like, it was her purpose to make sure he was out of the house and was out of the house, and would really take on that. And I'm working from home, but she was on it, man. But at the same time, when you're doing that, you tend to worry a lot.
Yeah, take a lot more.
And if you get into that rut and you start to get your brain trained in that way, because worry and anxiety is different. So you start to worry, it can produce anxiety.
Can produce that though, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and you're worrying about your husband, you're worrying about your kids, you're worrying about how we're going to make it financially.
Yeah.
Generally, women need to feel financially secure, and that wasn't happening for a lot of people. And folks lost their jobs, or they couldn't go to work at all. And how are we going to make it? Some folks lost their homes. I mean, that's a big deal. I remember, there was a time years ago when we lost our home because of 2008 when the crash happened.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And there was no work, and there was a lot of, the bank didn't help, but they gave us some really bad advice that we followed, because I did what they said, and it ended up like really costing us. But it was tough, and if it wasn't been for my parents, we would have been homeless with 2 children. So it's tough, But so it's I think that plays a part into it. There's more, I'm sure, that I'm not even thinking of. But so just all the stress, and I think that we're becoming we are relational, and we're not having that. And social media and pandemics and all this kind of stuff are separating people. Yeah. And I can remember when I was a kid that the next door neighbor and us, we used to play football together. We'd have cookouts together. Kids would come over, birthday parties. We were always doing stuff, but that doesn't happen now. If I walk out of the house and I can say hi to somebody and they wave back, that's like a big deal. It just isn't there anymore. And because we're segregated like that, and I think a lot of stuff in society that's happening is causing that. It's causing a segregation. They don't want it to do that, but it is. And it's not healthy.
Garage door neighbors. Right. Because you can pull in your garage, but I clean my garage, so I can pull into our garage and close the door and not talk to anyone.
Right.
And don't have to communicate, don't have to say hi, don't have to do that kind of thing. I mean, I go out of my way. As a matter of fact, my neighbor the other day, I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but my neighbor the other day is across the street. She is my eye doctor, and which is awesome, by the way. Hey, I need a pair of contacts on the fly. But anyway, I digress. But the other day I said, hey, Sean, how is, and I asked him about his daughter. She's going to WVU, West Virginia University. And so they just dropped her off. And he said, you know what? Thanks for asking. Just thank you for asking about that. Because, he's a little more introverted and everything like that. He just appreciated the time that I spent with him asking about his daughter. How are you doing with it? Because we know, we have a son in the military, all that, and that anxiety and angst of being separated at that moment, and so he was just so appreciative of that. And I told him, I said, hey, listen, I told your wife, I said, that she may not take me up on the daughter, but if she just feels anything there while she's just there, hey, give me your number. I'll call her. I'll pray with her over the phone. I'll just straight up with him, and he goes, I may need to call you, and so you can pray with me, or I'll just come knock on your door. I said, well, come on over. We'll pray, awesome. And I think those are those moments where it's just, you see the connection, even though he's really pretty much an introverted person, that he needs that connection somehow. He needs to unpack this feeling that he has, this angst, and it's not just. Sometimes it's more than just your spouse being there, helping you unpack that. It's other people and other entities that can help you get that release and that kind of bring your anxiety down on something or a situation. So it's so that was an interesting.
Yeah, people looking for that sense of connection, and like you say, social media is such a false sense of connection.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's really deceptive in that regard. Again, I remember growing up as a kid. Every day, I'd walk over 2 blocks to my friend's house, and we would all get together and ride bikes and dig holes and play in the local pond and swim, and just every day doing stuff together. Play with fireworks. Probably shouldn't have done that.
You got all your fingers.
I do. It's a miracle. but it definitely, that real sense of connection and being together and bonding that doesn't really exist anymore. With young guys, I've noticed their bonding time tends to be with headphones on their computer games, all in their own houses, and they're chatting and playing games, and that's it. Yeah, that's how they get to know each other, and it's just so far removed from that physical connection that we need. Right. I've got a couple questions for you. You use this analogy of a cooker pressure and anxiety functions like that. If you keep putting stuff in without a valve, it explodes at some point. And it explodes differently for everybody. For some, it's a panic attack. For others, it comes out in anger, or I imagine everybody has their own coping mechanism or addiction or whatever that is. But I'm interested in the valve, because the valve can look different for everybody as well. So maybe you could talk about, we talked a little bit about what are healthy things, hobbies. What should people not do? I'm anxious, I'm depressed. What's a bad strategy for me? Like, they're watching this podcast right now. Like, I'm alone, I'm by myself, I'm anxious about everything. What's the worst thing somebody can do? Or what are bad steps that people seem to cycle through again and again and again, or something that you see?
Running away from it.
Right.
Escaping it. Don't run, just be in it. And sometimes it's scary to do, especially when you're by yourself. So that's why I think having a therapist or a pastor, somebody who's familiar with that to help them walk through it, I think is really important. But people want to avoid it. I don't like the way this feels, so I'm just going to stay away from it, whatever it is. The problem is, like you were saying, I have no idea why this happened. I'm in a familiar place. I'm in a place where I'm comfortable. I enjoy it, and I'm having a panic attack. And what can happen is people sometimes will equate that with the panic attack. Well, I'm not going to the gym anymore. And then you had one at Walmart. Well, I'm not going to Walmart anymore. And
you know what? I had that thought. I did have that thought. Now that you say that, I had that very thought, because what it reminded me of was the panic attack. Like, and if I go there and have another one, they're going to think I'm crazy.
Right. And so you're even more anxious.
And then, you're more anxious, and then you bring shame into it.
Yep. Guilt.
All of that.
And imagine if you would have fed into that.
Yeah.
What would have happened to the anxiety? Right. It would have gotten stronger. And that's what agoraphobia is where you're afraid of open spaces, because you've had these experiences. This isn't all of them, but let's say you've had these experiences, so your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, to where I'm in my house and I'm not leaving my house. And that was one of the things we saw was people who dealt with social anxiety, they seemed to be doing great because they were told to stay in their house. This is great. DoorDash. This is awesome. Instacart. I'm good. You know what I mean? And then, okay, it's time to go back out now. And they start getting, so some people improved, not really, but their symptoms improved because they were protected and they were told that they could do it. It was the right thing to do. Right. In that moment. But others who aren't used to being trapped in the house all the time started getting depressed. And that's something for me. I cannot, if I just sit, if I go the entire weekend and just sit on the couch, I am like no good. I'm irritable. I get more depressed feeling, and I have to get up and do something. And that's something that's from my parents. And that's one of the things that I was going to bring up, that some things are instilled, well, we're basically programmed when we're kids. So from the ages of 0 to 7, like from 0 to 2, we're in what's called alpha. So our brain frequency is in alpha, which is subconscious. Then when you hit 2 to 6, it's in theta, which is where we go when we go into a deep sleep, like REM sleep is we're in theta. They're in it constantly. So what's happening is they're being downloaded. So they're just learning how society works. And by the time you're 5, you learn 95% of what you're ever going to learn. And we don't think about that because we're learning how to tie our shoes, pull up our pants, how to use a fork. There's so much we're learning that we take for granted. So you don't sit there and think about how you're going to use your fork. You just pick it up and use it. It's subconscious. It's just there. So, but what we also get is, you're in a family where there's a lot of domestic violence, and it's scary and it's putting stuff in you, but you're learning that's how relationships work. You're learning from society. This is how society works. Everybody stays away, and you got to be leery of everybody. So they'll say, I don't understand why, like this little girl who grew up in a home whose father beat her mother, she grows up and she gets to a relationship with a guy who now beats her. Well, why would you do that? Well, she didn't do it intentionally. It's subconscious. That's just who she gravitated to, because that's what she was taught. That's why the Jesuits used to say, give me a boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. Wow. So it's that happens with all of us. So we can get things that are a silent message So let's say you have two parents, right? Mom and a dad, and the child's sitting there just watching them. And they're basically discussing who's going to take the child because they both have things that they have to get done. And they're like, no, you need to take him. No, he needs to stay with. No, you need to take him. Blah, 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 on back and forth. Well, what message do you think the kid's getting? Nobody wants me.
Yeah.
And that's a solid message.
Wow.
And neither parent feels that way. They love their child.
Of course.
But they hear it and then they take that in. Now they've got a core belief that's down in there that says, people don't want me around.
Man.
People really don't want me. And though they deal with it and they push through or whatnot, that's still there. So if you have this sense of not belonging or this sense of low worth or whatever, that can lead to addiction. So the way I like to show that to my clients is I'll do this stupid drawing and get them to laugh and stuff. Yeah. What the problem is that we try to deal with the anxiety. We try to deal with the addiction, and they're just fruit.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's the root?
Yeah.
And if you don't dig down and take care of the root, and that's why you'll see so many, like I've heard people say, I've been sober for 20 years, and every day I got to get up and figure out why I'm not going to drink today. That's a problem. That's a problem. And it's because you haven't dealt with the root of what's going on. Why did you have the addiction? What's the deeper, like what's happening inside? So if it's rejection, let's say somebody has a root of rejection. Well, the reason they have that root is because they have doubt. The soil and the water that's feeding that root is they doubt something about themselves. I'm not good enough. Or if people really knew me, whatever this thing is that we say to ourselves, that's why it's there. So we need to dig up that root and replace it with acceptance. And once I begin to accept who I am and I accept the fact that other people accept me, and I liked what you said during your sermon, Socratic questioning that you used.
Yes.
Socratic questioning.
Yes.
And that's really good because it makes people face themselves. And I'll do that. What I'll do is I'll just sit there and stare at them. And just let them sit in it. And they're like, what? I'm like, say it again. And they'll say it again. Because I want them to come to the conclusion.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people go, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
What am I saying? And then I'll make them say it. Because as what you speak, say, and do is how you rewire your brain.
Speak, say, and do.
Speak, say, and do is neuroplasticity, right?
Yeah.
What we think, what we say, and what we do is how we wire our brains to formulate these new pathways.
Yeah.
So I'll say like, what are you getting? That I'm the same, that I'm whatever. I'll say, right, so these are people and they deserve to be accepted. Aren't you a people?
Right.
And they'll laugh and go, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So say it again. And they'll say it again. So you get them, start pulling that out and letting them discover that and start living in it. Just start realizing that because you have somebody who's dealt with a trauma, and when that trauma happened, let's say the person was wearing a shirt that had a certain diagram on it or something, logo, and they're walking down the street and they see somebody with that same logo and have no clue and go into a total panic attack because inside the brain knows, but they may not register with it, and they're like starting to have a panic attack and they don't understand why. So that's why it's so important to dig down deep and start to bring it out and let them discover it. Because in sales, I learned this: if I say it, it's a lie, but if you say it, it's truth.
Yeah.
So you say it.
Yeah.
And now it's truth. And it works. I've had kids and adults, everybody will just sit there and go, well, I see it. I see what you're saying. And that's it. When I was showing you the picture before with the old lady, young lady, that's the thing that I try to show them. It's a paradigm shift in our mind.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to see, like they'll say, well, yeah, I see the young lady. And then you show them and they'll go, oh, I see it. That's therapy.
Yeah.
That's all therapy is learning to see it in a different way.
Yeah.
And learning about their cognitive distortions and learning about all that stuff and how they operate in them and how it affects them.
Yeah, you're not changing the story or the narrative. You're just changing the perception of that story or narrative. It's the same picture looked at, like you said, from a different paradigm, different point of view.
That's it.
Maybe I could ask you a question. We've talked a bit about anxiety. How does anxiety differ from depression? Are they intercrossed like this, or are these two manifestations of a similar root that come out? Are these completely separate things?
It could be from the same thing, and one person becomes depressed and another person becomes anxious. So depression is like low mood, and that can come from low dopamine. It's harder to figure out because it's hard because you have to have like a specific test done to be able to figure that out. But the symptoms of dopamine causing depression would be more low motivation, lack of interest in things that they normally have interest in. Depression from other things would include that, irritability, tearfulness, isolation is a big one, where folks just want to start to isolate. And then, of course, when it gets worse, they begin to have thoughts of suicide and things like that. So,
how many people do you think live with anxiety and depression that go completely undiagnosed? They just get on with it.
Oh my gosh, probably I have no idea. It's got to be
probably in the millions.
Yeah,
like in terms of percentage, most of society is struggling with this.
Yeah, at some point, at some way, you know what I mean. And I think the more like that ACE, I think I sent you guys over the link for ACE. It was a study that was done that showed that children that that went through traumatic events such as domestic violence, abuse, where they were abused in some way, drug use in the home, parents divorcing, different things they would go through as a test. And if you scored 4 or higher, it showed that they were more susceptible to mental health illness and were more susceptible to physical disease like arthritis, cancer, heart disease when they got older. And it's because of all that stress, all that stuff that's in you. It doesn't just hang out. It destroys. It slowly just, it's like the little foxes that destroy the vine, right? It just slowly takes away.
Eats away at you. That's what I think people don't fully understand sometimes, is how much the psychological affects your physical being. Like it's a physiological response. You know, we're talking about dopamine and chemicals. This isn't a thought experiment. This is something physiologically happening to not just your mind, but eventually your body. And your body will manifest what's happening there over the long run eventually.
Stress is a silent killer. That's what they call it, right?
80%. I think the doctors, MDs, were saying that 80% of the people they see that come into their practice is due to stress.
Wow.
80%.
Man, that's crazy, man.
I mean, your stomach, like with anxiety, you can start to have
stomach issues.
Gastrointestinal issues, stomach aches, back aches, headaches, stress. I mean, I'll carry it in my shoulders. It'll go down my neck and just in my shoulders. And I just feel like I got 1,000 pounds on me.
Have you ever felt like when you're driving down the road, you're like this, and then all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And then you're like this. I do that all the time. All the time. I carry it right on my shoulders. That's why I went to the chiropractor today. That's what he tells me all the time. Yeah, he tells me all the time. He's like, dude, you just need to relax. I said, I can't. It's hard too.
It is. It's hard too.
And it's the simple things though, isn't it? I read a study that talked about 15 minutes in a natural environment, green environment, woods, mountains, can lower your blood pressure to normal. Like you're talking about very simple, basic solutions. It's not complicated methodology we're talking about here. Sometimes, I guess, with trauma, that's slightly different, or extreme cases of addiction. But talking to the average person who's watching this podcast, the solutions here are really pretty basic. Sometimes we're looking, I think, for like something very profound or extremely complex, like to fix my, solution. But a lot of it comes down to really basic structure, sleep.
Sleep is huge.
We'll talk about that for a little bit.
I think people don't really understand sleep hygiene. And we're not getting proper sleep. Because anxiety will stop you from, like, you'll wake up throughout the night, anxiety, trauma, both. And depression can do it, where you'll wake up in the middle of the night, or you'll have difficulty going to sleep. With PTSD, you can have night terrors where you dream about the event, and that'll bring you out. So it's really important to, like, sleep hygiene would consist of having a cool place to sleep.
I'm laughing because I'll take melatonin.
Right. Having a cool place to sleep.
Are you up to 10 milligrams yet? Or
20.
So those, you gotta.
It's a lot of melatonin. I'm sniffing melatonin right now.
Oh gosh,
no, just kidding.
That's a joke.
That's a joke,
right?
people. Joke.
Having a dark place, having it dark, like having lights and stuff for watching TV. Like I always tell people, get the TV out of your bedroom. Your bedroom's not made for you to watch TV.
I have a TV in my room.
Get it out. Watch.
I've turned it off. Is that better?
No,
I've turned it off. No, but I mean, I read a book now.
Yeah, that's
an hour before. You told me that.
Yep, that's good.
I've been doing that
because it kind of brings you down.
Yeah,
and it starts to mellow you out before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So like reading a book, listening to music, not headbanging music, or something upbeat, but something more relaxing. Maybe some classical is good. That puts me out. But you know what I mean? Like anything that's soft. You know what I mean? Having it comfortable, having it cool.
Cool is a big one. Yeah.
Because it's more comfortable to sleep in that. Your body can do better.
69 degrees in my house. Having
it, having a night. I mean, every day, going to bed the same time, waking up the same time.
Oh, you are preaching right now. I tell this to young people all the time. And I get this. Everyone has a slightly different circadian rhythm.
Right.
Slightly different, not crazy. And teenagers need more, scientifically proven, more sleep than adults need. But getting your 7 to 8 hours. But am I right in understanding when you sleep, this isn't very scientific, but it literally flushes out toxins that build up in your brain over nighttime. REM sleep helps you sort out memories and catalog them into the right files and places in your brain. So your brain is working overtime in sleep, and it's doing all the things that it doesn't get a chance to do while you're awake.
That's right. It's real important. And making sure that when you wake up in the morning that you get sunlight. You go out and look at the sunlight.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's a time thing because your body's saying, "Oh, it's daytime."
But it was raining this morning, Tony.
Well, that's okay. Just go out and look at it anyway.
Just picture it in the brain. Picture it in the sky. It's there somewhere.
Right.
Look at the rain and just be like, "Man,
yeah,
it's daytime. It's raining. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah,
God's watering the earth. I'm gonna have something to drink tomorrow."
Yeah.
Every time somebody complains about rain,
be
I say,
grateful.
Yeah, you sure do like having that water to drink, do right? So let's.
Attitude of gratitude, right?
Yeah. And gratitude's a big thing, man, for all of it.
It is, yeah.
A grateful heart cannot be depressed.
Yeah.
And what I tell folks is,
come on,
we can go through the gratitude list, which is fine, but take one and meditate on it. Why are you grateful for that thing?
Oh, that's good.
What is it about that makes you grateful? And then with your relationship with God, bring that into it.
Yeah.
And just the gratefulness and the kindness and the love that he's shown us by bringing that into our life.
Yeah.
And if you meditate on that, 15 minutes, doesn't take like hours, just start your day that way. Go outside, nice cup of coffee, tea, water, whatever it is you like, and just sit outside for a little bit, let the sun hit your face, get that vitamin D3, and that's good, and get out there and see the sun and meditate on something. And take one thing each day and just really let it sink in.
That's good.
That's good, man. We're going to end there. Okay. We're going to end there because, I think they're going to have to continue this anyway on listening because we've expanded our time with the video portion. But real quick though, give us a little more information on if somebody's struggling right now, suicide, super depressed, who can they reach out to?
988. They can call that as a crisis hotline number.
Okay.
Made it pretty easy that way. Instead of having a long phone number. Psychology Today has a long list of therapists that are in your area. You can put in your insurance. You can put in your issue that you're dealing with.
Okay.
And it'll bring up folks within your area. Anybody in the church, if you need to talk, you want to talk, I'll be happy to sit down and talk with you some. That's fine.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. Thanks, Tony, for coming in today. Appreciate it. Thanks, Pastor Jay. Well, this concludes the Off Central podcast. We hope that in some way today this enriched your life.